It's World Telecoms Day, and in the studio in Johannesburg talking to me is Mark Levy, the joint CEO of Blue Label Telecoms. Mark, if you'd have gone and studied entomology 20 years ago and been cut off from the world and come back to South Africa or any other country in the world today, you would have been completely discombobulated by the advance in telecommunications. I mean, we have to put it into perspective, not only in the last 20 years, but every single day almost there's some new innovation.
I think from when we started, even as early as 2001, no one expected the growth in specifically telephony to grow where it was. I look at it, it's more like the snowball effect. You know, these things going downhill and just picking up more and more momentum. What took, I don't know, 5 years in the past, now taking 2 years, taking 1 year. You're looking at these social networks. What took companies to get 50 million consumers over 10 years is now taking weeks. So it's been amazing. It's an amazing space to be in.
Yeah, that Chris Locke interview that we've just played out, he said something quite telling. He said many people in Africa, for example, are taking a giant leap into the 21st century because they're not getting their first telecommunications experience with a landline like I used to do, but they're getting straight into smartphones and mobile telephony, and that is the future. I want to sort of broaden the argument before we get specific about your business and what you're doing by asking, is there a place for a landline operator in South Africa, for example?
It's a great question. I think the converged play makes a lot more sense, whereby you can converge a fixed line with mobile, with your ADSL and so forth. I'd be willing to bet that most people lie in bed and reach for their cell phone rather than their fixed line. So I think the old days of having just a phone sitting there waiting to do phone calls is gone. I think what we need to do is offer more, you know, within a radius of your house, being able to use your phone or your mobile phone as your landline. So changing the way things happen.
Yes, and I think with innovation comes new companies, with new companies comes competition, with competition comes price wars. So distribution, incredibly important, great for the consumer, great for the economy as well.
Without doubt. You know, if you looked at telephony operators in the beginning, it was all about coverage. Who could get coverage first? Sooner or later, everyone had coverage. Then it was about subscribers, who could get subscribers. Then we talk about mass penetration and saturation. What's become critical is distribution. You know, anyone can go on television or in the media and say, well, the products, we're launching new products. But if it's not available in store and there's not a feel good about buying the product, then there's a big problem. So we're seeing it as a distributor, more and more people are coming to us to enable or take their product further and wider into the market.
So what you're saying is that eventually one of these things that I've got here, people laugh at me when I've still got one of those, by the way. They still think that I'm a dinosaur and I've only had it 2 years. But what you're saying is that that thing that I've just showed you is going to be my life in the future. I'll be banking there, I'll be buying tickets there. And where do you fit in? Where does Blue Label advance that technology and that service?
You know, if you look at the modernization of society, this faster, quicker, better society that doesn't want to queue, that doesn't want to have to commute to do things, the more one is able to do at a specific point in time through a specific device, is going to be a lot more appetite. So the question is, how much and how quickly can the cell phone evolve into becoming or proliferating mobile wallets through the community? And those become complex because yes, you can build technologies. How do you get money into them? How do you get money out of them? Where can you use them to pay and receive? How do you get converged strategies in terms of, well, I own a wallet, do I allow ticketing, do I allow other processing? So it's not just about technology, and I think technology is important, but I think technology is there. It's about trying to get everyone to work on the simple mindset of enabling distributors like ourselves to deliver their product to the modern day consumer.
And I think the modern day consumer is a different sort of consumer in Africa than in Europe, for example. And this is where mobile telephony and technological advancement really comes to the fore, because remote rural areas undoubtedly will benefit from the sort of products that you've been talking about. And is that a growth area for you and for other companies?
Yeah, you know, it's difficult always. People compare different countries. You know, we've seen some major coups like in Kenya, where they've had an amazing M-Pesa run. But you've got to compare apples with apples. You know, when you start in a market and it has very low banking penetration, very low retail penetration, when you come with something, it's everything. The complexity is when you enter into more developed economies with much more developed banking infrastructure, retail infrastructure, is how these things can operate. And I think that's where it's getting stuck, is that complexity of dealing with all these moving parts. But by all intents and purposes, people are going to get it right. And the way we transact and the way we're going to transact in the future is going to be very different to what we did 5 years ago, even to today. I'm seeing the progression of technology. We're deploying technology whereby you can enter stadiums these days by not having to physically go get a ticket, but by having a tap and go scenario. So we're actually seeing the pioneering of taking, if we call it a good old aged product, and repackaging into a modern day product, I would say.
Is there a danger that we become a little bit too clever and we get overloaded and, for example, the system fails for let's say for 1 hour, the system goes down and everybody is reliant on the sort of future world that you've just sketched out, and then everything collapses? Is that a real threat to the whole development?
I suppose technology, everything comes with some inherent risks. People like to build in redundancies, having backups, but our lives are based around technology. No matter what we do or what we say, we become a very technologically enabled society. So one has to ensure that what they're building and what they're creating in the future allows for redundancy, allows for backups, allows for things to go wrong. It's not going to say it's not a perfect world, but one needs to cater for those downfalls.
You've spoken about what you're up to, but you must sit down and say, right, in a year's time we want to be doing this, in 10 years' time we want to be doing something else. Can you give us any predictions? Can you give us a glimpse of the future with Blue Telecoms, Blue Label rather, and also other companies? Is there anything that you really see that in 5 years' time we will take for granted, but we can't even imagine now?
Yeah, I think we all as technical companies need to be careful we don't build Rolls Royces when we need Mini Coopers. I think the world in a couple of years' time, the way we do transactions, the way we engage with the consumers are going to be very different. People want to be able to do things, as I said just now, quickly. So the ability to buy an aeroplane ticket, as we're seeing now, you buy an aeroplane ticket, paying for it on your mobile phone, using a QR code to go and scan onto an airline. So I see more and more products being offered in a prepaid world as an alternative, not necessarily as a replacement, but as an alternative. So who says that a cash consumer cannot buy an aeroplane ticket? Why can't he go into a petroleum forecourt and say, well, let me buy a ticket to Cape Town? It's a route. He then phones the airline and says, look, here's my e-ticket number. When he gets to the airline, he shows them his ID and he gets his ticket. So I think supplier complacency is delaying the evolution of this, and more suppliers are coming out of that, what we call a cocoon, and allowing modern day distribution to enable their products further and wider into the next generation of customers. And where you are right is when the customer does it for the first time that way, that's going to be his way forever. And that's why it's so exciting, is that ability of all these additional products and services in the future, and we're going to see a lot more of that coming.